up today is a fairly colorful presentation to tell my story in pictures of my journey of entrepreneurship from the West to Africa. I suppose when I was coming down here, I thought, what story could I tell you to sort of kick this off, to talk about the African resilience, the African spirit, what makes an African entrepreneur tick? And I thought, well, I could tell you that most Africans support Arsenal, and Arsenal won their game today. I thought I could tell you more about myself, but Chikwe told me before the show started that you don't self-idolize here. So I thought I'd tell you about a story of my cousin Ike from eastern Nigeria. Ike, after several years in school, came out of school, had saved a little bit of money, and decided to start his own business. He visited friends and families, raised a little bit of money, and decided to open an electronics shop in Lagos. After a short while, his electronics shop was fairly successful. People came through the door, bought things. At Christmas, like we do in Africa, we sort of go home and we tell people how successful we've been by buying them presents. So Ike, my cousin Ike did that. Went home, bought a few presents, drove his cars along the dirt streets. And after Christmas, he came back in January. He went to his shop. To his absolute dismay, he saw a shop right next to his, selling exactly the same product line, electronics, opened by his first cousin. and it had a big sign on the top, and it said, "Lowest prices here." And he thought, this is so unfair. Well, as the story would have it, margins decreased a little bit, but he still made a fairly decent living. Easter came along, he went back home, bought a few presents, told his story to family and friends, said, look, business is tough, but we're getting by. So he came back from Easter, and on the left side of his shop this time, he saw another shop, exactly the same product line, opened by his best friend. Big sign. Best deals here. Ike went away and thought, look, how imaginative can I be? Do I pack up or do I come back? Anyway, he licked his wounds, got himself off the ground, went to the signage company, got a big sign and put on his shop. It said, main entrance here. The moral of this story is Africa is open for business. It's no longer a one-trick pony. You can't be the only game in town. You've got to know your game. You've got to be inventive. You've got to be resilient. You've got to be motivated. I thought, having told that story, I thought maybe I ought to tell you a little bit about my perceptions and then tell you a little bit about Landmark, the company I founded 12 years ago, and its journey through Africa, or from the West into Africa. Now, over 20 years ago, I came back to Britain, and this was the dream I was fed when I was in Nigeria. I was fed a country or a continent, with military power, a leisurely lifestyle, financial success, a lifestyle that everybody, the other side of the fence is always greener, but a lifestyle everybody wanted to buy into. I mean, I even bought into the lifestyle myself, and I thought, you know what, I love this. I want to have a wife, 2.5 kids, and a dog. I ended up with 2 kids, but without the dog, and a lovely wife who I'm not sure is here. Anyway, having lived some time in the continent, I realized there's another side to the continent we call Europe, that we've all found out. And I think everybody in this room who's spent any sort of measurable time in Europe will understand that there is crime in this country, there is political chaos, there is unemployment, there is financial crisis. I mean, all the things that people talk about in Africa are right here. So why does Africa get such a bad deal? Well, that's the deal we get from Africa. That's the deal that the media tell us about Africa. Crime, chaos, public transport facilities decaying, unsophisticated men and women. But at least we have the decency to advertise our hijacking hotspots. I said to myself, is this the Africa I grew up in, being portrayed in the media like that? I said, no, not really. This is the Africa I know. An Africa full of traditions. An Africa that's grown up. An Africa with emerging technology now. An Africa that actually has buildings, believe it or not. We do have sophisticated people, and we are becoming a better continent. It is work in progress. Like everything we're doing, it is work in progress. But we're not the slide before. We're more this slide. The 3 cities I've pictured here are real cities. There's Johannesburg, there's Nairobi, and there's Lagos. And the 3 cities of Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Lagos make up, I think the annual, I read some statistics here, I'm going to just take a chance. But I understand the annual household expenditure in each of these cities exceeds $25 billion. I mean, that is a big market. And if you want a piece of it, you shouldn't be sitting here, you should be over there. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Landmark. My next few slides will be really a whistle-stop tour of Landmark. It's very difficult to do this presentation without talking about myself. Chikwe, sorry. Landmark is a company, basically, we set up to provide integrated property solutions 12 years ago. We tried to do it in Europe. We opened up offices in London, in New York, in Frankfurt, in Madrid, in Prague. You know, we did this stuff. We had mediocre returns. I had a bloody nose in almost all the places, with the exception of London, probably because I lived here. And I thought after some time, what do we do? Do I continue sort of jumping from country to country within this continent and not being accepted? A little bit more about that later. Founded Landmark in 1998, as I said, 12 years ago. We expanded through a number of places. 7 years later, we had to think of a plan B. We went into Africa. 5 years in Africa has been decent. We've had our successes and failures. We failed in quite a few places. We went into markets in Angola, came out, in DRC came out, in Mauritania came out, in Tripoli came out. We've had some successes in Lagos, in Nairobi, in Accra. Excuse me, if I'm coughing, it's not because I'm nervous, I have a cold. Or is it the other way around? So we've had some of our successes and failures. Over the next 5 years, we hope to achieve a lot more than we've achieved in the past. But it is still work in progress. You know, we started off with a capitalization of $200,000, and someone tells me that it's worth a lot more than that today. We have a turnover in excess of $20 million, and we hope in 5 years' time it will be worth a lot more than that too as well. We have about 40,000 square meters of office space in management and about 100,000 square meters of real estate in development. We are in some of the world's, well, some of Africa's best cities, including London and New York. We're building some signature mixed-use developments in a number of places too. We've created excellence in some of our buildings. We truly do believe you can't do tomorrow's work in yesterday's office. And so we're trying to bring this into Africa. We're home to some of the world's biggest and most successful companies, and we're hoping that one day that will rub off. And it's a few pictures that tell the story. Our starting team in Europe in '98, and our starting team in Africa 6 years ago. Today, and we've got over 100 people. I'd like to think motivated and dedicated, but you've got to pay them if you want them to remain that way. This is the bit I've got to tell you. What have I learned about Africa? Well, the first thing is Africa is never really as bad as the media portray it. Yes? But I tell you something, when you're leaving Africa, it's never as good as the Africans claimed it was. But that was perhaps the first lesson I learned going into Africa. And I suppose what I take away from it is there's the good and the bad. There's the winter and the summer. You've got to take both. It's not always going to be good, and it's not always going to be bad. The very challenges and the very obstacles you see are actually opportunities in disguise. You've got to unwrap them. Business school, I suppose maybe I should start from there. They say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. I went to business school about 20 years ago, and one of the things that I was told, look, leave your cynicism at home, leave your preconceptions at home. You know, bring your fresh new mind and come and learn. And I thought, what's this? I mean, what would Aliko Dangote have thought about that? Huh? Or Mo Ibrahim, or even Lord Sugar of these days. And I thought, I had the opportunity to work with another self-styled entrepreneur, a guy called Mark Dixon at Regis. I worked for 5 years with him. I found out much later that entrepreneurs of that caliber, they're not made, they're born. I found out that what I had to learn in business school was I needed to recognize the tools that enabled me to make the right decisions. I put a little phrase under there, and that's my lesson too. You can't change the cards you're dealt. You can only really change the way you play the hand. I left, I joined Regis 5 years before I started the Landmark business. And I said to myself, after 5 years of helping Mark, I was running the property and logistics team there, and I helped Mark open 200 office locations in 60 countries, late nights, early mornings, economy flights. I thought, crazy stuff. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this for myself. And I thought I'll go and set up my own business. So I did. I set up this company called Landmark, and within the first few months, I realized that working in a successful business is certainly not the same thing as running your own. So I started my journey into the unknown. Now, I did what everybody does, briefcase in hand, business plan in the briefcase. You know, if you think you have a good idea, you think everybody should listen. The reality is that nobody's interested apart from yourself. But I went to the banks, and I got a lot of kind-hearted rejection letters. I went to family and friends, and I got a little bit of money, to be fair, because there may be friends and family in there that wrote the odd check. But I did get a lot of advice, a lot of excuses. And some other lessons. But I then went back, to my old boss, and I said, look, Mark, you started your business with £200,000, and you sold it for £1 billion 8 years later. Surely there's space for people like me in your life after my 5 years. Nigerians we always think our problems are other people's, not. But luckily for me, he was a good guy. The lesson of staying power is, look, there were times, honestly, I thought, you know what, I need a plan B, I'm going back to get a day job. And everybody told me, go and get a day job, this thing is not working. And it really wasn't working. But this lesson of staying power is so vital in business. You've got to just stay with it. That's why you have to do something you're passionate about, something you love. If you love it and you're passionate about it, you will stay with it. If you don't love it, you walk away at the first hill. A bad idea in one place could be a good idea in another place. I hinted you that I started in Europe, and we went through a number of European cities. And as I said, some were good, some were bad, some were absolutely awful. And I thought to myself, what on earth is wrong? The people here making money, why aren't I making money? Mark made money doing this, for Christ's sake. So but I quickly realized, this was my lesson number 5. I realized that there was nothing wrong with my model. It was where I was. I decided to do something, to go somewhere that I was a little bit more passionate about. And that was Africa. I also realized your opportunity in Africa, early entry into Africa, gives you a number of things. It gives you that ability to establish a brand. You can create your own market. You can influence customer preferences. You can do so many things that you don't stand a chance of doing in Europe, yes, or in America, or even Southeast Asia these days. But, Africa gives you that opportunity. And, I'm grateful that Africa gave many people before me that opportunity. And I'm grateful that Africa is trying to give me some of those opportunities today. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. As I said, I didn't reinvent the wheel. I went to somewhere I was more passionate about. I created this business in Africa to reflect Africa, not to reflect Nigeria, where I'm from, or South Africa. That was fairly easy. But we opened offices more or less simultaneously in the west in Lagos, in the east in Nairobi, in the south in Johannesburg. I said, find out where the people are going and get there first. Everybody, you've heard the stories, everybody's going to Africa, so why wait for them to get there first? Get there first, hold your sign up when they arrive, Well, one of the things in Africa you've got, I suppose this is the biggest lesson I learned, is you can't expand through Africa with so many different places. Africa, we talk about it as if it's a country in the West. Africa is a continent, it's not a country. It's a collection of different countries and different cycles of developments. Everybody has different needs, different cultures, different ways of life. In Nairobi, you turn the traffic lights on, people stop. In Lagos, you turn them on, people hit each other. When you turn them off, they stop. Africa is very different. And so I thought, how do you expand reasonably successfully in Africa? And I thought, well, we'll get a partner everywhere we go. And we did. And everywhere I went, I found minority partners. And I tell you something, some of them were absolutely brilliant. And some were very bad. And some were damn right ugly. But nevertheless, I found out what makes a partner the right partner. They've got to be intelligent, up to the minute, well-informed. They've got to be a good listener, especially if they're listening to me. They've got to listen for a long time. But most importantly, yes, they've got to be passionate about what it is you do. And they've got to have the same ethical standards and principles that you have, so you don't run out of time. In summary, I wanted to tell a little bit of a story about the statistics. You know, we've heard the story, the growth in GDP, the number of mobile phone subscribers, you know, the population increasing. I mean, some of the statistics are fascinating, and I say to everybody, there's a McKinsey report, and this was from the McKinsey Global Institute. Read it. It will tell you more of a story that I could possibly tell you here. This is my final slide. I mean, finally, I'd like to say, our leaders of the past have failed us. It's as simple as that. There's not one leader that's behind us that was good for Africa. Our leaders of today, they owe us big time. And I'm sure we'll be standing here in a year's time saying our leaders of the past have failed us again. Not if, I know Pat is here somewhere, not if he gets into power. Our leaders of the future, do we want to sit down and watch the script be written, or do we want to write that script? We have a responsibility to be part of that leadership of the future. So I want everybody in this room to ask themselves when they're leaving, what have I done for Africa? Have I just listened to the stories? Have I just talked about it, or have I just tried to make a quick buck? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.